Thanks for joining us here on Big Country Politics. Today, we are joined with Texas House Representative Stan Lambert, who represents Taylor County in District 71. Right now, sir, you are in the middle of the 87th legislation. How are things going?
Well, Marley, I think things are really beginning to pick up. The pace has really quickened in the last 2 weeks. We're seeing more calendars appear on the House floor. We're seeing more bills that are being laid out. And I think that's an indication that we're in the full swing of this session, and we've only got 7 weeks after this week left in the session. So May 31st is our date that we will end the regular session, as you know.
So constitutionally, the only thing that has to be done by the Texas Senate and House is to create the budget, correct?
There's two things basically that we have to do this session. We have to create a budget and approve a budget that is presentable, and it's a balanced budget. That is part of our constitutional requirement and expectation. And then the second thing that we have to do every 10 years is redistrict. So those are the two things that you might say are mandated or required for us to accomplish during this session. We won't get to redistricting in this regular session that ends on May 31st. So we'll be called back sometime, maybe late summer, early fall, to deal with the redistricting. But the budget is moving along. The House budget I'm talking with other members of the Appropriations Committee, and it's moving along very well. The Senate budget is the one that is going to be approved first, and was approved, and will be sent over to the House. We'll be looking at that, but we'll be approving our own budget. And then what happens every session is both the Senate and the House will organize a conference committee with representation from both House Appropriations and Senate Finance. And that conference committee then will work out the differences and make sure that we have a budget that can carry us in this next biennium. And hopefully that budget will be representative of an economy that has rebounded, that is in the process of rebounding from a very difficult economic downturn due primarily to COVID, as well as the snowcopolis that we experienced here just a few weeks ago.
And have things been discussed about this $35 million federal COVID aid that's not included in the budget right now from the Senate? Is the House hoping to address that?
I think so, and I believe that a lot of the money has been earmarked for education. That's something that I think a lot of us in the legislature are continuing to push and encourage the governor to make a decision about when to release those funds and how that's going to impact and affect our school districts around the state. I know that it's very important in House District 71 that the money that came from the federal government from the CARES Act related to COVID does need to be dispersed, and we need to make sure that those funds are being used to help repay and recover some of the expenses that our school districts had to incur in order to pivot really and do the virtual learning process, as well as hiring additional aides. Yes, we are working very, very diligently to ensure that $35 billion is used appropriately and helps our school districts not only meet their budget requirements for this year, but also the next couple of years as well.
Definitely. And last time we spoke, we discussed that you were hoping to get even more funding than we saw from House Bill 3, which was about $11.5 billion towards education. So you're hoping to take that $35 million, but also what funds are you guys trying to allocate for the House budget specifically for education?
Well, I think making sure that we sustain the level of funding that we were able to get passed in the last session, House Bill 3, which did provide that additional funding for our school system, public education. Primarily, those funds went into the classroom to help our teachers, to give better salaries, to help better increase benefits, to give our teachers the tools and the resources they needed to teach in an environment that was very difficult, and even before COVID occurred. So, and from what I've been told and what I've seen so far in terms of the House budget, it looks like we're going to be able to sustain that.
So part of education that we've seen this year is the need for students to have Wi-Fi and the need for rural communities to have Wi-Fi to be able to access their doctors. Do you have any updates for us on what you're doing to, improve broadband across Texas?
Well, we have a very strong bill in the House, House Bill 5, which is a broadband expansion and accessibility. It would help us begin to put a plan in place for the entire state of Texas to address the fact that we have almost 800,000 people to 1 million people in Texas that really do not have adequate access to broadband. And what I mean by that sometimes is that it's not that they don't have access, but it's affordability. And in many cases, in some of these really rural areas of the state, people could sign on to broadband, but the cost of doing that is so expensive that it's really not feasible. And that's not fair, because broadband should be something that every Texan has access to. And we want to make sure that that plan that we're putting in place to work with our partners, work with our vendors, and to make sure that we develop the infrastructure that's necessary to reach every single home. House Bill 5 will do a very different way of mapping and identifying those households and those areas in rural Texas that do not have access. We want to make sure that we have incentives in place in order for those companies and those providers to be able to do this without bankrupting their companies. So it's going to be a combined effort, a partnership that works on both sides of the aisle to get this done. But I can't think of anything that's been more bipartisan, both Democrats and Republicans working together to address this crisis that we're in. We can't have telehealth, and we can't work with our rural hospitals, our rural medical communities without good broadband. So it affects so many things: small business, our farmers and ranchers who need access to information about commodity prices and what's happening on the markets, not only in the United States, but across the world, as well as our telehealth and certainly our education community. So broadband just covers such a broad area that we need to cover, and we need to make sure that we emphasize that and get that accomplished in this session.
Thank you, sir. And when we come back for Big Country Politics, we'll continue our conversation with Representative Lambert about what is going on in this legislative session.